to Union soldiers on the other side until more Union soldiers showed up behind them. And the slaughter over here was just terrible.
A 100-year-old Civil War photo had just been discovered, but when the experts zoomed in, their faces drained of color. What they saw hidden in plain sight left them completely stunned. "You need to tell me exactly where you found this." "Right now," said Professor George Kramer, barely blinking as he leaned over the faded envelope on Claire's desk. Claire Donovan wasn't sure whether to feel excited or scared. "I told you," she said, her voice unsteady. "It was in an old trunk. No label, no name. It was just stuck under a bunch of railroad bonds and a box of buttons." The trunk had been sitting in her family's attic for decades, gathering dust. Claire had only pulled it out because she liked the brass latch and the cracked leather straps. Inside, it was mostly what you'd expect: some old clothes, lace gloves, brittle letters, and a crumbling leather photo album. She almost tossed the album aside, but one photo caught her eye. It looked different, thicker than the rest, wrapped in wax paper, and gave off a strange smell, like dried tobacco mixed with old glue. She waited until the cleaning was done before unwrapping it, and the second she opened it, she stopped breathing. There, clear as day, was President Abraham Lincoln, tall in his black frock coat and trademark top hat. He stood to the far right, next to an empty wooden chair. To his left was General Ulysses S. Grant in full uniform. Other Union officers stood around them, stiff and formal, sabers at their sides, like they'd been caught mid-sentence, frozen in time. But what really stopped her was the color. This wasn't hand-tinted or painted. It looked like someone had taken a full-color photo at the end of the Civil War. "I've never seen anything like this," Kramer said, staring hard. He'd been teaching Civil War photography at SUNY Albany for 17 years and had written 3 textbooks on the subject. "But this doesn't make sense," he said, pointing at the image with trembling fingers. Color photography didn't exist back then. He motioned toward the bottom corner. "That's Albamon's silver print stock, definitely from the 1860s. That process couldn't support color." Claire's eyes lit up. "So it's fake?" "No," Kramer said, narrowing his eyes. "That's what's so unsettling. It's not fake." She hesitated, then asked what she'd been wondering since the beginning. "Could it be valuable?" "Valuable?" Kramer looked up. "If this is real, it could change how we see Civil War history. The Smithsonian Library of Congress, even the British Museum, would fight over it." Claire didn't know whether to feel proud or uneasy. Kramer adjusted his glasses. "I need to take this to the New York Historical Society. I have colleagues with non-invasive scanning equipment." She paused. She didn't know Kramer well, just a few guest lectures in college and an awkward dinner at a conference. But his voice was serious, honest. "All right," she said. "But I go with it, and I stay involved. No museums behind closed doors." He nodded. "Deal?" Claire gently returned the photo to its wax sleeve and sealed it in an acid-free case. The next morning, she followed Kramer into the archives room at the New York Historical Society. She felt like a nervous student again. A few lab techs were already waiting. Among them were Dr. Elsa Turnbaum, a forensic imaging expert, and Mason Lee, a specialist in 19th century paper preservation. As they unsealed the sleeve, the air in the room seemed to tighten. Elsa slid on her gloves, carefully lined up the photo under a high-resolution scanner, then glanced at Kramer. "Ready?" she asked. He gave a small nod. The screen lit up, showing the image in stunning detail. The uniform shimmered in a deep navy. Lincoln's suit was jet black, with soft creases visible at the knees. You could even see dust on the officer's boots, the frayed edge of Lincoln's pants, and the carved grain of the wooden chair beside him. "I'm telling you," Elsa said with a frown, "this isn't hand-colored. These colors are baked into the image itself, like early Kodachrome, only this would have come decades before that." "That's not possible," Mason whispered. "Album and prints can't hold chromogenic dyes." "Yet this one somehow does," Elsa replied, eyes glued to the screen. As the scanner continued, the computer listed off material data, paper stock consistent with the late 1800s, traditional binding compounds, gum arabic, and one odd detail, an unknown organic pigment, most likely beetroot and indigo. Estimated creation date, April 1865, give or take 5 years. Claire blinked in disbelief. So this picture was taken right at the end of the Civil War? Roughly, Kramer said, and if that date holds up, it could have been taken during Lee's surrender. Her heart pounded. Claire pulled out her laptop and began matching the faces in the image using an archive tool. Grant popped up quickly. So did General Meade. The rest took longer, but one by one she started confirming them. Except for one. A slim man stood right between Lincoln and Grant. Claire paused. That face. "I've seen him before," she said quietly. Kramer leaned in behind her. "He's not in any official records. Might have been an aide, or maybe a civilian volunteer." Claire shook her head. "No, he looks like my great-great-grandfather. I'm serious." She grabbed her phone and pulled up a scan of an old Donovan family photo from 1912. In it, an older man stood beside a barn with a dog at his feet. But the jaw, the ears, the brows, they were almost a perfect match. Kramer squinted at the screen. "You really think that's him?" "I know it is." Claire dug into her files and pulled out a letter her grandfather had shown her once. It was written in the 1920s by William Donovan, a Civil War medic who'd vanished in April 1865. The letter read, "The photo of the chair was never meant to be kept. Burn it if you ever find it." That night, Claire sat in her apartment, staring at her screen. She typed William Donovan's name into the Civil War Records database. The file popped up. Rank, medic, 104th New York Infantry. Last seen, April 6, 1865, near Appomattox. Status, missing in action. Final note, absent during final muster. So why was he in a photo dated April 9th, standing next to Abraham Lincoln? Claire immediately emailed Kramer. The next morning, his reply was short. "Get to the lab now. You're going to want to see this." Claire rushed in, barely noticing the machines humming around her. Kramer didn't say a word. He just pulled up a rarely accessed log from the War Department. There it was, a single mention of a Donovan, handpicked by Lincoln in early April 1865. Not as a medic, as a personal escort. Claire stared. "You mean, like a bodyguard?" "More like a quiet observer," Kramer said. "Lincoln didn't trust everyone in those final days." The file showed Donovan had been quietly transferred out of his regiment just 3 days before Lee's surrender. No formal orders, just a single field note. WD, moved to shadow post per Al's request, not to be logged. No weapons drawn unless required. Claire felt lightheaded. He hadn't gone missing. He'd been hidden. Suddenly, the sword in the photo made perfect sense. Donovan wasn't there as a medic or even an officer. He'd been placed next to Lincoln on purpose, not to be noticed, but to observe, and if necessary, to act. Lincoln had trusted him enough to put him beside generals, trusted him so much that history never even knew he existed. But if Donovan was that critical, why had the family believed he vanished? Why had he warned them to destroy the photo? The lab was silent, but the team kept studying the image, hoping for more answers. Claire, Kramer, Elsa, and Mason leaned closer as Elsa moved her cursor to William Donovan's jacket lapel. "Wait," Elsa said. "There's something sewn in here." She zoomed in slowly, her fingers shaking. Just under the fold of Donovan's Union coat, partly hidden beneath the edge of his collar, was a tiny embroidered badge, no bigger than a fingernail. But the stitching was clear. 3 letters, PEC. Kramer barely whispered the words. "Presidential Escort Committee." Elsa turned pale. "That doesn't exist, not in 1865, not officially." Kramer shook his head. There were rumors that Lincoln had formed a small, unofficial group in his final weeks. No names, no records, just a few men, messengers, bodyguards, quiet soldiers, who reported only to him. "And you think William Donovan was one of them?" Claire asked. "That's not the worst part," Elsa said quietly. She zoomed in further. Just below the badge, stitched in thread only a shade lighter than the coat, was a faint message. It read, "Target verified. Stand until April 14th. The room went still. April 14th, the night Lincoln was assassinated. Claire took a step back. "Are you saying William knew?" Kramer didn't answer. If the message was real, Donovan had known something. Either he was there to stop a threat or waiting for orders that never came. And maybe he was silenced before he could do either. Claire's thoughts were spinning. That's why he disappeared. That's why he'd told her family to destroy the photo. Because it wasn't just a keepsake, it was proof. Proof of a secret role in Lincoln's last days. Just as the weight of it all settled in, Elsa spoke again. "I think I figured out the color." She pulled up the spectral scan data. "It's not modern dye. The color was embedded during development. They used a hybrid method, hand-tinted emulsions combined with light reactive oils." She paused. "Very rare, not reproducible, but some records mention a small War Department team who tested the method, supposedly at Lincoln's request." Claire stared at her. "You're saying Lincoln ordered this photo?" Kramer stepped forward. "He didn't want it for propaganda," he said. "He wanted something deeper, a photo that told the truth. But one no one would understand until the time was right." Later, the team uncovered a journal entry from Timothy O'Sullivan's former assistant, dated 1866. It mentioned a photograph commissioned by the president himself with a special chromatic process meant for long-term legacy. This was that photo. And now it had finally come to light. Mason nodded slowly. This photo didn't just capture history, it hid a secret Lincoln took with him. Kramer leaned back, and someone, maybe Donovan, made sure it stayed hidden. Until now. The photo was placed in a high-security vault under the care of the New York Historical Society. But exact digital copies, preserving every detail, quietly made their way into trusted historians' hands. Claire's choice not to sell it made headlines. But it was never about fame. It was about finishing what her great-grandfather had started. Within a week, the Smithsonian reached out. The Library of Congress asked for access to the high-resolution scans. Claire turned them all down. Then she found something even more incredible. Tucked inside the folds of the original album, hidden behind a brittle envelope, was a handwritten letter addressed simply, "To William, from Al." It was dated April 10, 1865, just 4 days before Lincoln was killed. Claire held the fragile paper in her gloved hands while Kramer read it out loud. "My dear William, if this war taught us anything, it's that truth rarely survives the men who need it most. You weren't chosen to draw your sword, but to stand, visible, among those who do. What we do with peace will test us more than anything we did with war. So stand where they don't expect you. Watch who you must. And if history forgets you, let it. I won't. Al." Claire let out a slow breath. It was real. William Donovan hadn't been erased by history. He had stepped directly into it. No medals, no title, no credit. Just duty. And now, more than a century later, his quiet part in it was finally seen. A museum exhibit was created, titled "The Man Who Stood Anyway," a tribute to a forgotten figure in Lincoln's final days. At its center was a replica of the photo, a full biography of William Donovan, and above a recreated version of that empty wooden chair, the words from Lincoln's letter. "Some men fight with swords, others with silence." Claire stood silently at the unveiling, watching visitors linger over the image. She didn't need anyone to call him a hero. It was enough that people finally saw him, not just a man with a sword, but someone who had witnessed history, and quietly carried its weight. All it took was someone willing to look closer. Could one old photograph rewrite what we thought we knew about the Civil War? And if you were the one who found it, would you have dared to zoom in? Thanks for watching. If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more of history's hidden truths.